Hello, everyone. I'm Carly Ann with Parsons Entrepreneur Academy. Thank you all for joining us today for our monthly office hours series, where we invite successful and inspiring entrepreneurs and leaders to share their stories and the lessons they've learned along the way. For those of you joining us for the first time, Parsons Entrepreneur Academy is a platform that empowers creative entrepreneurs like yourself to build sustainable businesses around your art. And we achieve this through our three pillars that include mentoring, training, and community. You can visit parsonsentrepreneur.com to learn more about our platform. All right, so I am very excited to be joined once again by our guest and course author, Paul C. Brunson. For those of you who tuned in and joined us last week, Paul delivered an amazing mini course that is a part of his personal branding masterclass that he created with us. And he's joined us again to dive into his entrepreneurial story and tell us about all of the lessons he's learned along the way and give you an opportunity to ask him questions that you might have about his story or any advice that he can give you as an entrepreneur. All right, so some of you know Paul, and for those of you who are being introduced to him for the first time, Paul C. Brunson is a serial entrepreneur, television host, and columnist whose specialty lies in teaching other professional and social skills. An internationally recognized expert in interpersonal relationships, personal development, and entrepreneurship, he currently serves as a featured business columnist for USA Today, co-host of UK's Celebs Go Dating and Married at First Sight television shows, and host of the Better with Paul podcast and event series. Major media outlets throughout the world, such as Good Morning America and the New York Times in the US, The Guardian and Sunday Brunch in the UK, and the Jamaican Observer and TVJ in Jamaica have sought out his insights on everything from finding love to pursuing an entrepreneurial passion. The heart of his work is centered on impacting lives through mentorship and developing a new generation of servant leaders with a desire to change the world. He is the founder and chair of Give Love, Build Hope, a nonprofit organization dedicated to transforming schools in rural areas of the Caribbean. A proud second generation son of Jamaica, his greatest achievements are in his roles of husband and father. When he's not serving the world, he is serving his family, likely with a red stripe beer in one hand and a good book in the other. Hey, Paul.
What's up? What's up, Carly Ann? I didn't even say before we started, too. The whole fedora brim is ridiculous. I love it. Like it's perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is perfect. And also, too, I was reading through the comments. Shout out to Manhood Boot Camp. Much respect. My sister Natasha holding it down from Harlem always. I see a lot of folks from Jamaica. I'm very much looking forward to this. So thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us again. I love that your community goes everywhere with you. It's always amazing to see.
I tell you, you know what's was so powerful when I look through the comments is I see Deborah in there, is how diverse. Like you see DC, you see Jamaica, you see Trinidad, you see London obviously represented, and it shows you how small the world really is. One of the most pivotal books that I've ever read is written by Thomas Friedman about how the world, the world being flat, right? But in essence, all he's saying is that it's such a small world. And me now moving to London, and Carla, you're in London right now too, I think has helped me to better understand how small the world really is. And then that, I think, suggests how much power we have because the world is so small.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely circle back on your move to the UK and how you're navigating between two different continents as an entrepreneur. But
Yeah.
before we get to that, for the people who are just being introduced to you for the first time, just give us a quick snapshot of your background and, like quickly, like what you did before you became the current you.
Oh man. Well, I always like to say I'm Jamaican. I was like, a matter of fact, I mean, this isn't even a prop. This was just sitting here. It's like, a Jamaican always has something around them, to represent the flag. But I always say that that's important. That was a big part of my upbringing. So I spent the first couple of years of my life in Jamaica, Queens. So that was that was big. So I always say that I'm a son of Jamaica. I always say that also I'm a husband, before I am a TV host or a writer or entrepreneur. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a cousin, I'm a friend. All of those descriptors are truly much more important to me than anything else. And I think what probably binds us all together right here is we're all entrepreneurs as well, but we always have to understand the priority and where entrepreneurship lies in that kind of totem pole of values. You know what I mean? And so I am all of those things first. And maybe we can get into this later because, in studying some of the most successful people in the world as it comes to their net income and their net worth, I've realized that you've seen a lot of families be destroyed in their acquisition of assets or their acquisition of power. You know what I mean? And so for me, because I know who I am first, I'm not concerned about losing those things, right? Those are my things first. But I think what really got me started in the entrepreneurial journey is being Jamaican and a New Yorker. Like I was hustling and not hustling, but I was hustling. So I was at a young age, I was selling cans of Coca-Cola. To construction workers in my neighborhood. I was always trying to come up with something entrepreneurial to do. And when I look back, I can't say I was necessarily entrepreneurial. I was salesy, very salesy. And I think that's a very important attribute to an entrepreneur is the ability to sell. And it's interesting, as I've moved in circles throughout the UK, I've noticed that there's less bravado in the sales. Also in the Caribbean, less bravado in the sales versus in the US. So I think that's really where I hone the salesmanship. Also, finance is a first love of mine. So I went to business school. I also have, I was an investment banker. So understanding finance was not only important to me in my entrepreneurial journey, but also I think it's very important for an entrepreneur. A lot of my mentees, I'll talk to them. I'll say, well, tell me what's your cash flow, right? And some of them have no idea what cash flow actually is, or what a balance statement is, or how to create a profit and loss statement. Fundamentally, a business is run by their financials. If you look at the biggest businesses of the world, the Amazons, the Teslas, right? Who has the most power? A lot of people say it's the CEO. No, it's actually the CFO, right? The chief financial officer typically has the most power in these organizations because they're the ones who are managing the finances. So finance was also a big part of my background. And then probably the biggest moment of my career was, so I got out of college, I spent time as an investment banker, but then I got a job working for a very wealthy Turkish family called the Ugels. And they run an organization called, now it's called BAU Global, but at that time it was called Bahçeşehir. And they own K through 12 schools, private universities, private colleges, test prep centers. But now it's moved to, they own the real estate under it. They have a stadium, they own basketball teams, like they own a lot of stuff. But when I started working for them, they owned a smaller amount of stuff, and the family was probably worth, if I were guessing, 100, 150 million. So still big, but not as big as they are today, with assets of over $1 billion. And I was able to work directly for the CEO of that company, and being in such close proximity of someone who was acquiring so much wealth, and seeing how human he was, like, no disrespect to him, he's my mentor, but seeing how he had flaws, right? Seeing how he wasn't Superman, seeing how he was struggling with certain things like family balance, right? Seeing how human he was helped me to understand that I could actually achieve anything I wanted to achieve if I wanted to achieve that status or less, right? He really helped me to think, quote unquote, outside the box. And he also helped me to begin to think that the world is my playground, not just New York, not just DC, not just the East Coast, but the world is my playground. Because I started living between DC and Istanbul, Beşiktaş in Istanbul, when I was working for him. So that was a major move in my career. And then another major move in my career was when I stopped working for him. I worked with him for 5 years, one of the best jobs of my life. But my wife in particular was like, hey, you got to stop this, because, Mr. Ugel would call me on a Thursday and say, yeah, Paul, I know you're in DC right now. I need you in Istanbul tomorrow by 12 p.m. 7-hour flight. It's like we had to book the flight, get over there.
Wow.
It was crazy. So it was too much. And also to talk about the human side of this, is it was interesting. That was right around the time when, or a little bit before that, where we were trying to get pregnant. We had tried for 8 years, and we tried many things. And what I realized also is that our life was so stressed, through my wife's job. She was working for a law firm. Through my job, it was stressed. Our relationship was bad. And we were actually at a crossroads. I could have seen us divorcing at a certain point then, if we had not known our values, going back to that. If we had prioritized the building of the career, or the building of the business, or the building of our brands, I could see us easily having gone our separate ways, but we decided to pull back to us. She quit her job. She liquidated, my wife liquidated her 401k, her retirement fund, which a lot of people say is crazy to have done, but she liquidated her retirement fund, and she invested it in this crazy idea to start a matchmaking company. I left working for a guy who is on his way to becoming a billionaire. People thought I had the best job in the world. And I left that to start a matchmaking company, of all things.
Which is like a perfect segue to my next question.
Yeah. So, yeah. So these are the blips. These are the blips, and that's only halfway through the career. But you know what I mean. That's how things got started.
Yeah. The next question that I want to ask is, how did you make that decision to get into the matchmaking business? Like, how did you all decide to take that leap and take such a huge risk? That's a huge risk that Jill took in that testimony that you just gave. How did you come to that decision, and how did you get started in matchmaking?
You know what I find interesting? So I've been asked this question a lot, but I think I'm going to answer it for the first time differently. So you posed the question, why did we decide to take so much risk, such enormous risk? And I don't want anyone to think that I'm speaking big-headed when I say this, but I've been going through a lot in life, especially recently, and understanding that everything is momentary. Everything is, the job that you'll have it for a finite amount of time. The relationships you have, you're going to have it for a finite amount of time. This day, we get 24 hours in this day. It's a finite amount of time. And then if we're blessed, we get to tomorrow, right? There's a finite amount of time. And therefore, it's very important to know that we really don't have ownership over anything. We don't have ownership over time. We don't have ownership over things, right? All we have is the moment. And not only is it just the moment, but it's the belief in our ability to enjoy the moment and then take advantage of the next moment, right? So when I look back at the time, I think we thought it was a little risky, but to us it was, you know what? Our My career working for the billionaire, it wasn't guaranteed. He could have fired me next week. At my wife's law firm, they could have fired her the next week. You know what I mean? The money we took and we invested in that, we could have invested in the stock market and lost it in the stock market, right? We could have, like, everything was finite. So for us, it wasn't a risk. And even looking back, it wasn't like it was this enormous risk. It was us just taking advantage of the moment, being in the moment. And I'm really seeing, and not to go way left, but just in the zone, is like I'm seeing as I get older that the key is to accumulate less things. The key is to figure out how you can actually, you can disinvest. This is the key. So long story short is I don't even know if we even felt it was an enormous risk. Now, I know what the system tells us. The system tells us, hey, don't do that. The system tells us stay in the system, keep working for the man, keep doing all those things. And if you don't do it, you'll be penalized. So I feel like it's like the system, and it really is the system saying, don't do these things. But when you can divorce yourself from all of that, you realize it's not really even a risk. And then for us also, it was understanding that there was a true need, because I think a lot of people, when we start businesses, we start a business that maybe we have a need for, or like our friend has a need for, but we haven't fully tested the market to understand, is there what's called a market need? But for the matchmaking space, we had fully tested it. I quit my job, she quit her job. We spent a year testing the market, a year before we had officially launched a product that we were selling or a service that we were selling. So we knew that there was a need. So it was knowing there was a need. It was knowing, what, this whole thing called life is momentary anyway. I can get hit by a bus tomorrow. You know what I mean? Also knowing that we had belief in our skills, knowing all of those pieces, that became the equation to why we started the matchmaking business.
So I love how you reframed what we're typically told as, being the safe route. This notion that, like staying in a stable job, like the power isn't in your hands. Like someone can decide your fate. And I love that you all were able to reframe that and take a bet on yourselves, essentially. So what was the education process like, now that you decided to jump into matchmaking? You're seen as a thought leader, a very well respected thought leader in that space. What was the education process like, for you at the beginning to work your way up to being seen that way and respected as a thought leader?
I love that question, because I went maybe a slightly different route than I think many people were doing at that time. Right. So one is I did the traditional things, like started picking up books. I also went back to school and started taking classes, and my wife did too, auditing social psychology courses, so we can get a grasp of like the theory of psychology. But the two things that I did that were most helpful were, one, I started taking on pro bono clients. Right. And I would take on these matchmaking clients and say, look, I've never I've never been a matchmaker a day in my life. I have a little bit of a clue of what I'm doing, but chances are I'm not going to match you with anybody, right? But if you allow me to work with you, my commitment is I'm going to give you 200% of my time, because you're the only person I have, you know what I mean? And I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to learn by working with you. Now, there's a fascinating story about that I want to come back to, but I did that for probably 6, 7 people, right? Where I worked with them, found the matches. I was doing everything, Carlene. I was gangster with it. One of my clients, She gave me the type of guy she was looking for. I was driving around the streets of DC, just looking to see if I could find that type of guy. I saw a guy who kind of fit her description. He was walking into a pharmacy, pulled the car around to the pharmacy, stopped, walked into the pharmacy. I was like, hey, bro, you're going to say this is crazy, but I'm a matchmaker. He was like, what are you talking about? Right. I followed him outside to his car. Like, that's how diligent I was, and serious I was. So taking on pro bono clients was big, but perhaps the biggest was I sought out the person who I believed was the number one matchmaker in the world. And I emailed her, called her, and I said, I would love to just pay you if I could come out and spend time with you and just to shadow you and learn from you. So I did, I'll say how much I spent. I paid her $5,000. She was in Denver. I flew out to Denver, right? First, I got to Denver. I was like, there are no Black people in Denver. First I was looking around like, this is my first time in Denver. There are no Black people in Denver. So I'm in Denver, check into a hotel, and I spent a week. She put together like this training course. I was able to go out with her and understand how she was doing. But I spent a week. That was amazing to me because it wasn't just the week. It was then being able to build a relationship with her. And then it was also about leveraging her brand, quite honestly, because then, I always say that, if you read like Robert Cialdini's, any of his stuff, Influence, which is one of the best books ever, Persuasion, which is one of the best books ever, is when you're trying to persuade a market to think that you are credible, especially someone like me, Black man coming into a matchmaking space, that's traditionally white women in matchmaking space. Also, at that time, I was considered young, to be entering the matchmaking space. I had to think, how can I instantaneously get some credibility? And associating myself with someone who was considered one of the best. She went to Harvard Business School, et cetera. That gave me credibility and entree into the space. So, the mentorship, paying for that. Also taking on the pro bono clients, going back to school, reading. That's how I began the education. But the education doesn't stop. To this day, I study. This morning, I was reading a research study. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop.
Talk about dedication and the importance of self-investment. That's
Yes.
amazing. So you talk about the importance of finding your superpower a lot. When you think about what your superpower is what is your superpower? What do you
Yeah.
see as your superpower?
That's no one's ever asked me that. That's a really good one. I'll tell you the superpower I'm trying to hone. I'm trying to be world class. And when I say world class, I always think world class is top 1%. So whatever, top 1%. I'm trying to become world class in teaching relationship science. That's what I'm attempting to become world class at. And I feel like it's within my realm for that to become my superpower, right? And given the different skill sets that I'm building on, because I know I'm not there yet, but I feel like that's achievable in my lifetime. Maybe I get there in 10 years, maybe I get there in 20 years, but to become world class at teaching relationship science in particular, that is where I'm trying to hone it. And when I say teaching, I'm talking about teaching it globally, which is why I enjoy so much being in a different culture, being in British culture, because it's forcing me to have to teach differently. It's forcing me to have to learn differently, So that's what I'm trying to become world class in. And my superpowers are all of those skills that will allow me to do that.
So speaking of superpower and skills that will enable you to do that, that's an important thing to be able to hone in on whatever your superpower is in life, whether you're starting a business or whether you're building a career. Finding that will help to propel you forward with more ease. It won't be easy, but it's better than swimming upstream doing something you're not meant to be doing.
True.
So
True.
for the people watching, how would you advise people to on the ways to find or identify what their superpower or superpowers are?
Yeah, it's real simple. Put yourself in different scenarios. That's it. Like, put yourself in different scenarios. When I say different scenarios, uncomfortable, right? Non-familiar scenarios. And then watch how, you could just psychologically, for example, we either in new scenarios, it's either fight, flight, or freeze, right? Anytime we're presented with something unusual, we react in one of those three ways: fight, flight, or freeze, right? Just in seeing how your body naturally reacts to different environments, that's an indication of whether or not you should continue pursuing that. So if you're in a new scenario and you completely freeze, right? Or you completely run away, right? That's the flight. Then, okay, you may not be naturally, that may not be naturally what you're supposed to be doing. But if it's to fight, right? Then that means, and I always say that when you're fighting, that means that there's something worth the fight, right? So if there's the fight, then okay, naturally you're supposed to be there. So even just looking at the psychology of putting yourself in a different scenario, it even plays out there. So I always say you want to experience different things. Being here in the UK is me experiencing something completely new. Doing television in the UK, something new, right? And I was honestly, I was going to come. I was coming just for 3 months. I mean, well, this, Carly, we were going to be here for 3 months. That was it. But we got here, and the flight didn't kick in, the freeze didn't kick in, but the fight did. It was like, oh wow, I like what's happening. Let me continue to explore this. I think you could look at that in every aspect of your life. Let's say you're working for whatever company you do. You code, you're a coder, right? Well, see how you can maybe move into graphic design in your coding, opposed to maybe you're coding like you do wireframes. I mean, you can move into graphic design. That's just pulling yourself slightly outside of the comfort zone and just seeing, right? So the key is you want to continually put yourself in these challenging positions. And by the way, I think that when you look at the arc of the average person's career, that even plays out. Because do you know what age people make the most money? Actually, let me pose this to everybody in the audience. At what age do both men and women, and this is mostly a US UK study, but at what age, what decade do you make the most money? Is it in your teens, your 20s, your 30s, right? What age would you say? Let me see what people say, because I think it pans out, right? When you look at the arc. Let me see. All right, my man Liam says 40s. Okay, I see 40s. I see two 40s. Aha, Natasha, she says 50s. It's 50s. Right. Kaufman did, Deborah, 50s. Absolutely. Kaufman did a study around this. And what they found is that in your 50s, this is where you make the most money. Now, why is that? It's because most people have spent the last 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, right, identifying their superpower, right? Identifying their skills, right? Identifying what it is that they're good at. And then they were able to apply it and then get a premium from the market, then get paid for it, right? So I say, if you want to accelerate that process, just put yourself in more of these challenging scenarios as early as possible.
So speaking about, pushing yourself out there, trying new things or trying different things, a lot of entrepreneurs especially creatives are often juggling, different things. There are different business endeavors, right? They're multi-hyphenates, and you're a multi-hyphenate person. You work on different business endeavors. How do you like, tell us how you manage being a multi-hyphenate entrepreneur in a way that, you know, like people can learn how to do it in the most productive way. Because there is the danger of doing too many things in ways that jeopardize, you know, one of your main thing. So tell us a bit more about how you navigate being a multi-hyphenate and some of the best ways that people can structure themselves to be able to do that.
Okay. I love this question. And I'll even tie it into something I had said a couple questions previously. And that was, remember how I said one of the best things I did for the education was I started offering pro bono services, right? So here's a story not a lot of people know. Natasha, my sis, might not even know this one. Oh yeah, my man Brian Ford. By the way, Brian is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. Brian Ford right here watching, guys. Brian is an incredible entrepreneur, incredible entrepreneur. So a lot of people may not know this. So when so let me give you the end. I'll come back to the beginning. So one of the biggest pops of my career was being able to get hired by Oprah Winfrey, co-host a show with Oprah Winfrey. And I actually had a television deal with the Oprah Winfrey Network for over a year. And we did a couple projects. Lovetown was the biggest one, but we did a couple projects. And the question always comes up, Paul, how did you get a deal with, at that time, and she still is, but at that time, she had just come off of the Oprah Winfrey show. So she was the biggest talent in the world. So how do you get the biggest talent in the world to give you a deal? And not only that, she gave me a deal by literally watching a YouTube series that I did. So it's like, how did she pick you to watch a YouTube series? I don't get it. Like, it seems like it's luck, right? And it's luck. But I'm going to answer your question on how we balance lots of things. Is the story that a lot of people don't know is that the reason why Oprah watched my YouTube series is because one day she was on her plane, jetting around somewhere, and on the plane was a woman who was a writer for O Magazine. And this woman was sitting next to Oprah, but within earshot. She was ear hustling Oprah a little bit. And Oprah was talking to one of her producers, and they were talking about an idea for a new television show. However, they desired a new voice in relationships, right? So back and forth, they're saying, we need to find somebody who is, knows that relationships, maybe a matchmaker, maybe a date coach, right? And this writer is like this. And the writer says, oh, have you heard of Paul Brunson? Oprah and the producer say no. They go to Google and they see my YouTube series, right? Now, the question is, how did the writer know about me? Well, guess what? You know who the writer was? The writer was one of my first pro bono clients. Now, I'll answer the question. If the writer didn't like the work I was providing, would she have recommended? Would she have endorsed me? No. If Oprah went to YouTube and saw the first video of me and didn't like the video, would she have called me? No. So I think the lesson here from this story is to manage multiple projects, right? How do you do it? You do it by being great at the projects you do manage, whether that's one, whether that's three, whether that's 10. Everybody has a different capacity. Everyone here knows what their capacity is. But the key is don't half-ass anything. I always say nobody likes a half-ass. Everybody likes whole asses. Like, I've known nobody in the world who likes half of an ass. You know what I mean? So think about that. Only give 100% if you believe that that's a project you could like. Well, not only give 100% to all projects that you have the capacity to give to. So everyone has a different threshold, but the answer is whatever it is, whatever projects, you can't have like 3 projects you're great at and then one that you're iffy on, right? It just doesn't work that way, because your resume, your portfolio, your legacy is in the quality of the work that you're doing. You know what I mean? So that's it. Carl, you know what? I have to introduce this guy because he's getting ready to jump off, guy. The entire time on my lap, this is Peter Gabriel. Okay. I've never wanted a dog in my life. I had no desire to have a dog at all. This has now become like my baby, like literally my baby. And he's been asleep on my lap the whole time, but now he wants to get up and play. So I'm going to let him go play. But all right, PG.
And you're wearing matching outfits. I like it.
Oh yeah, we always coordinate. We coordinate all the time. It's bad. I'm walking around with like a dog, like a bag with a dog in. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I'm scared, to be honest with you. I'm scared because he's now going, because he knows I'm not watching him. He's going to go pee on the carpet right now. I know he's going to go pee on the carpet. Pee. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. All right. We'll see.
Well, I'll keep fingers crossed. Don't put it out there.
Oh man.
So now I want to talk about, like the importance of a team. And it's great to have an amazing team and partnership if you are juggling multiple endeavors and multiple projects. And you're fortunate to be in life and business partnership with Jill, your wife. Yeah. So can you talk about, what were the greatest benefits of you all, being partners in business and also in life through marriage? So tell us about that.
I love this question. So, I do a lot of mentoring of men, young men, right? And one of the biggest questions that I get is, Paul, I'm dating somebody right now. I really like her, but I'm not settled in my career. I don't own a house yet. I'm really trying to raise my income level. Should I stabilize all those things first? Should I get the business launched? Should I get the career going before I get married? I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. And I would say, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The key is to lock down your partner first, because if you have a strong partner, there is nothing that you will not be able to do, right? And so the biggest advantage I think I have having Jill, my wife, as my romantic partner, she's my best friend, she's my business partner, is that what I noticed, everything feeds off of each other, right? So if I'm filming, something can happen personally to me and I could go film and it can impact the project because it's personal, right? It can impact the business. The personal impacts the business, right? But if I don't have someone that I could go to who can understand both the personal and the business and how they impact each other, then how am I going to get any type of solid advice to be able to push through, right? It's very hard, which is why so many of us, when you look at Friends, like Robin Dunbar is the foremost expert on Friends in the world, right? He just wrote a phenomenally, new book. But Robin Dunbar is the person who came up with the Dunbar rule, right? Saying that we only have 150 people in our circle. And what Robin Dunbar says is that most of us have specific go-tos. We have like the friend we go to for relationship advice, the friend we go to for business advice, the friend we go to for fashion advice, the friend we go to for sports advice, right? Well, think if you could have all of that wrapped into one person, you know what I mean? That's beauty. There's power in that. And so that becomes, you talk about that's probably my superpower, or my secret power almost, is having that person. And then the last thing I'll say about having a partner like that is, what's gotten me the most, what impacts me the most negatively over the years. And I never thought this would happen to me. Because normally, I'm a pretty, happy dude. You know what I mean? But man, on the real, even today, not gonna lie, anxiety is a killer. Anxiety is a killer. And I was even saying this yesterday to Jill. I said, I feel like I smile less now than 4 years ago or 10 years ago. And I say, isn't it funny that I smile less now, but we have 10 times the amount of income isn't it funny? And I said, it's interesting. Biggie had it right. More money, more problems, It's like when you look at CEOs, I even say, look at Jeffrey Bezos. It's fascinating. Jeffrey Bezos, to me, does not look happy. And he's one of the wealthy, he's like, depending on the day, the first, second, or third wealthiest person in the world. Versus literally Google Jeffrey Bezos photos within the last year. He's divorced. He's got the new hot girlfriend. He's got all these things that you would imagine would add up to, I'm happy. That dude looks miserable. He looks miserable. But if you go Google him 20, 30 years ago, working in the room, trying to kick Amazon off, right? Uncool hair, looks real nerdy. He looked happy. He looked joyous, And so long story short is, I think the reason why is anxiety's got him. Anxiety gets a hold of the best of us. And so, but having a partner can really help you to manage through the anxiety. Really, really. So, I mean, just some thoughts.
All right.
Just some thoughts. Yeah.
Well, thank you for dropping those gems. And for people who are in the entrepreneurship trenches, who might not have their romantic life partner who can be in the trenches with them in that way. There's the traditional form of business partnership. Because you are a relationship expert, a lot of the advice or the basic principles extend to a lot of different types of relationships or connections. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs on, how to find a good business partner?
Yeah. All right. This is a question where, with age and even more experience, I'm going to answer this differently than how I answered this just 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, I'll tell you how I answered, because I've been asked this, and 5 years ago, I was like, look, everybody needs a partner. Co-founders have the most successful businesses versus solopreneurs. You want to look at your values. You want to identify, are you, more of the operations person or the salesperson? You want to go out on LinkedIn and blah, 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 blah. Like that was my line. I disagree with that thought now. I strongly disagree. I believe, and this is, some people are going to say, wow, Paul, I can't believe you're saying this, is I don't think you should start with a partner. I think you should start it by yourself, and you should evaluate what happens. And here's the reason why I say this is because I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it's something like 96% of business ideas end up changing within the first 3 months. It's some extremely high number. Maybe it's not 96, maybe it's 95, right? But it's basically all businesses will change fundamentally from idea to you start executing 3 months down the road, it changes. If your business changes, that means that the roles in the business change. That means that strategies change. So if you have a partner locked in on day 0, and then you get to day 90 and your business has changed, well, then what then happens with your partner, right? The other thing is, I have a ton of mentees that normally this always happens. I've had mentees in West Africa, the Caribbean, the UK, the US, and almost always they launch a business together, two of them. The business actually becomes successful. It changes, right? It becomes successful. You get 2-3 years down the road, one person has done 80% of the work. 80% of the work. The other person has done 20% of the work. But guess what? The equity split is 50-50, and you can't get out of it. Like, you're locked into that. You can't get out of it. Business has completely changed. You've done 80% of the work, and now here you are completely locked out, right? So instead, what I say is you go out there, you get your hands dirty. If it's your idea, go out there. Now, some ideas you need to have partners, equity partners. That's fine. But what I'm talking about here is no 50-50 splits day one, right? Sure, 10% equity stake, 5% equity stake, you get income participation. That's cool. But no 50-50 splits on your idea on day one, because your idea is going to change. So I've really flipped on my idea on that. Now, just to say that I still think that, like, to your point of support, right? Because this is really what you're talking about, support, partner, that kind of thing, is the most important is to have this kind of support right here. Like, everyone right here, if I go down the list, Natasha, Deborah, is it maybe Andrew, D, right? Everyone here, think about this. It's Saturday. You could be doing a million different things on Saturday, but you were here listening to someone talk about their entrepreneurial journey. That means that everyone here has a tremendous amount of values in sync, right? And so the key is to partner with people like this, like-minded people, get support, bounce your ideas off of them, right? Iron sharpens iron. And then use a support network like this, and then evolve from there. And then maybe 3-4 months down the road, you see that person has been sharpening your iron. You see that person has been consistent in holding you accountable. You see that person has been working on their business. Then maybe you say, you know what, D? You know what, Amber? You know what? Maybe we could put our businesses together after they've proven themselves. This is the same thing with love. Is I say, you know what? You can't fall in love with potential. Don't fall in love with potential. Never fall in love with potential, right? You get burned. Instead, you need to see them operate over time. Just to go to the relationship stuff real quick, is the divorce rate in every country in this world is half when you have a couple who have been engaged for 2 years. Why? Why is that? Right? In the US, 50% divorce rate. But if the couples have been engaged for 2 years, then their divorce rate's only 25%, right? Why is that? In the UK, 35% divorce rate. If you've been together for 2 years, typically it's about 17%. Why? It's because you got a chance to see your partner in bad times. You got a chance to see your partner. Are they consistent in character in bad times, right? Are they emotionally stable when things get bad, right? So that's the same type of test you want to give to your business partner. And that's the reason why I say you can't do that on day one. Don't fall in love with potential.
That is great advice. I was just that's a perfect ending to that, because I was just about to ask you, like, what red flags people should be looking out for, but the end of that response sort of covers that. This notion that you should give it time to put yourself in different scenarios with people and really get to know them, get to know what their underlying values are, so that you're not surprised down the line when the business blows up because you're not aligned.
Exactly.
All right. So you interview a lot of entrepreneurs. Like, you've interviewed, over 100 entrepreneurs. So apart from your experience, there's so many stories that you've accumulated as well. So out of all of the interviews that you've done and the data that you've collected and your own experience, what are the top 3 common traits that you've noticed in entrepreneurs who are successful?
I love it. Okay. And I'll even one up you. I'll give you my thought, and then I'll tell you who the entrepreneur was. So the first person that came to mind is Kasim Dean, or otherwise known as Swizz Beatz. Alicia Keys' husband. I've interviewed Swizz twice, and he like to the point where there was one thing that he said that I probably think about every other day. And that was, I was like, Swizz, between you and your wife, Alicia, I'm assuming you have 20, 30 multi-million dollar project opportunities every week. Every week, you've got to have people constantly, giving you different opportunities. How do you all decide which opportunity to take? Right? Because I know for some people it's about the money, right? But from what I know about him, know him well, it's not like the money's important, but it's not just the money, right? So how do you decide? And I think it's great because he's a creative, he's a creative's creative, and so is his wife. And he said, we only take on projects that we can make history doing.
Yeah.
And when he said it, it hit me. Like he gave me chills, because I thought, wow, like he's not talking about taking a project that he could do well in, or he could become, most recognized, blah, 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 blah. Or he said, it's about making history. It's about having the project and his participation etched in history. Like that is a bold way of thinking. That is a beautiful way of thinking. And if you think about it, my God, that's what he did. It was 8 months after my last interview with him that he and Timberland created Versus. Versus is historic. You know what I mean? Right. It's historic. You think of like he does, like he's delivering on that. So to me, that was, that was just profound. Right. So that was one lesson. Only take on projects that you could be historic in. And it actually, coincides with what I was saying earlier, is like, be 100%. So that was one.
That's powerful.
Yeah, I loved it. Loved it. Another one, I'll go to London now. And most profound interview I had in London was with Carl Loco, who I don't know if everybody knows Carl Loco, but Carl Loco at one point was considered to be one of the most notorious gang leaders in South London in the 90s. And he then changed his life, became close with the royal family, close with people like Richard Branson. And he does a lot of, he brokers a lot of deals, right? But for someone to have gone from like Council Estates, Brixton, drug, like, people don't have there's not as many guns in London as there are, in the US, or should I say in UK as there are in the US. But, he would say he would go to the chicken shop. He would have, bulletproof, he had, so he was in it deep for many, many years. And what I noticed about him in particular, not so much about what he said, but how he was saying it, is that he identified that he was great, like that he was gifted, he was blessed, and he believed it, right? He believed it. And because he believed it, he always believed that there was better for him. There must be better for him, And that touches upon what you're talking about with the superpower, because I always say, there's almost 8 billion people who live on the planet right now. But each of us is uniquely blessed. Each of us is extraordinary. That's what makes us each different, right? Even if you think of the biology of it, you think about how most of our genetics never would have made it. Like, in order for you to be here, Carly-Ann, 2 people had to have survived some super hardships, right, for you to get here. And then for each of those two people, two more people had to survive some super hardships. And you keep going back and you think about how many of their peers died, right?
Mhm.
From whatever it may, how many of them didn't make it? But guess what? Your ancestors made it, Carly. For you to be here today, you're extraordinary. Like you are. Genetically, you're extraordinary. You know what I mean? And so to understand how extraordinary we are and to own it and to understand it, once you know that, you begin to identify to say, you know what? I deserve more. I deserve more. I deserve better. And you begin hiring those standards. And that's the way he saw himself. He saw himself as a king. And all of a sudden, he then lands in circles with kings. He was king of, of gangs, and then he's now with princes and kings. You know what I mean? And it's because I think innately he believed it. So that was another, very powerful lesson, you know. And then last but not least, I have to take it to Oprah. I gotta tell Oprah. There's a million and one lessons she's taught me, but I'll tell you the one lesson that most stands out to me from Oprah, and she speaks in ways that you don't understand if it's a lesson or if it's just practical advice, right? So the first time that I was on camera with Oprah, it was a massive. We were in Kingsland, Georgia, filming Lovetown. It was a massive stage, 10,000 people in the audience. And I was nervous. I was nervous, big stage, 10,000 people in the audience, massive lighting, and the director is because it's being filmed and there's a stage director, and I'm getting ready to go on the stage first to introduce Oprah. And the stage director's like, all right, Paul, you go up, you hit your mark, you stand there, the light's gonna, right. But you hit the mark. And in my mind, Oprah could see that I was confused because he kept saying, hit your mark. And I was like, I don't know what a mark is. Like, what are you talking about? Where's my mark? But I was embarrassed to ask, right? You could tell how she just saw me and she was like, all right, he's shook right now.
Mhm.
She came over, she put her arm on me and she was like, baby, look, all you do is walk up on that stage and you keep walking until you feel the light. And once you feel the light and it's the strongest, that's where you're supposed to be. And that's where you stand right there. Man, Carly it gives me chills every time I think about that. She said, you keep walking till she didn't say you see the light till you feel the light. Right. And then she said, that's where you're supposed to be.
That means so many things.
Oh man. I was like, do you know how
Yeah.
many things that means? And to me, that's a lesson I've been taking is I'm just gonna keep walking, right? And then when I feel it, right, I'm going to stop. It means so many things.
Mhm.
You can enjoy the moment. That's where you're supposed to be. Like you could read into that so many ways, but that to me was a lesson when she wasn't even trying to give me a lesson. You know what I mean? So there's so many. I mean, there's maybe I should write a book on these, but those are three of the most powerful that come to mind.
Oh man, that was so good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna frame that last quote.
Yeah.
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 Well, so you've given us lessons that you've picked up from other people. We've learned some lessons from you. But looking back, are there, two or three things that you wish you'd known back then that you know now that might have influenced the way you did things differently?
Mm, mm. Yeah. Well, now when you say back then, when? It depends when. Like,
Well, in the beginning stages of your entrepreneurial journey.
oh man. Yeah. I would say I wish I knew, and keep in mind, this is, 15 to 18, 19 years. So at that time, it wasn't like it's so different. Like at that time, entrepreneurship wasn't cool. So to say you were going to be an entrepreneur, I was ostracized. That
Mhm.
wasn't cool. To have multiple careers was not cool. So I wish I would have been. Actually, no, I don't think it would have changed. I think because I'm thinking if someone told me, it's cool to have multiple careers, Paul, it wouldn't change what I would have done it anyway. I think for me, knowing that having money seemed to be a very important ingredient early on. And I think that some people underplay and some people overplay the money side of it. But I will go to a term that I heard a good friend tell me recently, and that is it's about having psychological safety early on.
Mhm.
And I think for some people, it's the money that does that, right? Because they say, okay, I can cover my bills, right? But the importance of having that safety is in a space that you could create is very important for an entrepreneur, whether that be physical, knowing that, it's a safe space, knowing that, you're not going to be kicked out of your home next month, that reduces the stress, knowing that you won't be kicked out of the country, like reduces the stress. Having a safe space always helps you to become more productive and more creative. I think I wish I knew that earlier in my career. I would have put more energy into that. Kicking toxic people out of your life. I would have kicked out some family members way back in the day, right? I really would have. Man, I would have kicked out some friends and some family members because they were creating toxicity that was impeding on my ability to create. So that's definitely number one, creating that. I'd say probably number two lesson would be the power of the world. You know, we're taught, especially in America, that the market is the U.S. only. I know in Jamaica, a lot of people are taught, you know what? Don't worry about Jamaica, but worry about trying to sell to the States, right? The whole notion is the world is a marketplace, right? And you may live in South London and be able to create something for someone in Nigeria or for a market in Nigeria, right? The world is your oyster. I wish I would have known that earlier on. That's two. And then three, this is gonna be maybe funny or not, but three is you don't have to like everybody. You know what I mean? It's like, or don't like you, or let me say this: do your best to reduce your interactions with people that you don't like. This is very important. This is kind of in connects with the first part, but what I've noticed over time is I actually like less people as I get older. Right. I saw someone commenting about me on Celebs Go Dating is if you probably see me on Celebs Go Dating, you probably say, man, Paul is different in series 11 than he was in series 4. Right. He's suffering no fools in series 11, but series 4, it looked like he liked most people. I realized that as I get older, I tolerate less nonsense. And I think it's okay. It's good to embrace that, you know, because I've seen with the most successful people is successful people don't hold on to anything or anyone that's toxic for long. So I would tell myself earlier, tolerate less nonsense, tolerate less people who are nonsense, and less scenarios that are nonsense.
That is a word. Psychological safety is everything.
It's everything. It's everything. Everything.
But speaking of the world is your oyster, so you're in London. You were born in the US. So you've navigated the US as an entrepreneur, and now you get to do it here, but you still have a footprint and you still are involved in things in the US. So in the last couple years, the nomadic trend has had an uptick, and there are people who figured out how to exist in many places and still operate pretty successfully as an entrepreneur while they're doing it. Can you tell us about your experience operating in two different countries, and what advice would you give to people who are trying to attain this way of navigating the world and being an entrepreneur at the same time?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's the future. It really is. And I also, even in my career, I spent quite a bit of time in Istanbul. So I was going back. I didn't do to the extent of living, like properly living in London, in Istanbul, but I was there for long bits of time. But it's the future, and it's the future for many reasons. If you're looking at it from the psychological safety, literally, I was just at a fun fair with my kids this morning, and somebody said, why do you live in London when you could live in the US? And I said, mass shootings, maybe. It's like psychological safety, right? And that is everything. So I do think it's a future. The other thing too is there are many advantages. Many, if I was to start going down the list, like one big advantage I think is the premium that we like to place on people and things that are different, and how you could use that to your advantage when you are in business. So I have a friend of mine who lives in Paris, and he was actually one of the first Black men to go through Y Combinator in the States. And he was telling me about how he never felt special until he went to San Francisco, Silicon Valley. And if he was just sitting in a room and there was other, men of color, women of color, anybody, right? The moment he said his name with the French accent, right, that immediately drew special attention to him. And then with that attention, it's now up to him to step into that light and then use it to his advantage. And so I think that this is the case. This is something that actually I want to write something more deeply on, because I see it also on dating websites, right? A lot of early on in my career in matchmaking, I would put my clients on dating sites that they were the exception in. Like you look at JDate, for example, which is, predominantly Jewish, right? But I was like, hey, let me take my client who's a Black woman, put her on JDate, right? And you know what would happen? Inbox blown up. You know what I mean? Because she's the exception. This is psychologically, we put a premium on the exception. I always say that I don't think that I'm extraordinarily that much better than a lot of on-screen talent, but I think I get a premium being American in a UK market because I'm different, so it's one of these where that is, I think, a very important strategy, is to think about how you can be the exception and then use that to your advantage. Very important. And we could be the exception everywhere, right? So moving around the world gives you that. And I mean, and I could keep going on, like the arbitrage between, the currencies, and like you could keep unpacking it, but I'll just stop at you could be the exception.
So I want to go back to entrepreneurial lessons. You are an avid reader, and not only do you acquire knowledge from the conversations that you have in your interviews, but you study entrepreneurs and you study their stories. What are your top 3 entrepreneurial stories that people should check out? I guess mainly if they have a published book that people can find. And I don't know if there's like a TED Talk or a video out if they don't have a book. What are your top 3 entrepreneurs that you think are great case studies that people should look at?
Okay. All right. So you know what? I'm going to go way left on this, Carly-Ann. You're going to say, oh my God, Paul's going way left on this. This is going to sound crazy. It's going to sound crazy. I have become, and this is the first time I'm saying this, I've become more of a skeptic on the entrepreneurial stories that we read in books, we see on these amazing YouTube videos, right? We see on Netflix documentaries. And the reason why I've become more of a skeptic is because, I work in television. I
Mhm.
work in production on television, right? I have published a book. So I understand how stories are massaged to present a very specific narrative and leave out a lot of the more important pieces of the story that really inform the reader, but it could be embarrassing to the entrepreneur. You know, point and example is, a lot of people, and this has now been talked about lately, but it wasn't talked about early on. People would say, man, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, these guys quit school, but when you really unpack it, you see, oh my God, their fathers were engineers. They worked in San Francisco. They were on computers since they were 8 years old.
Yep.
You know, that piece gets left out of the Mark Zuckerberg, bio, and you just see him from, Harvard to, billionaire. But that little piece was not little. It was, it was uh-oh. It was everything. You know what? Can I say side note is I'm trying to train Peter Gabriel to be aggressive. Not aggressive, but I want him to be a watchdog. He can't be a guard dog. He heard that doorbell. He got up off of his nap. He was like, who's at that door? Like, I like this. PG, good job. Good job. I need him to be that guy for me because he's so small. So I need him to be that guy. But so I've become a skeptic on these stories. So where I'm going to go left on is because I love learning from everyone. Everyone. I always say I was walking to the fun fair this morning with my 8-year-old and his friend, his buddy, who's also 8, and I was learning from his friend. He's an 8-year-old, right? But I'm learning new things from his friend. He's giving me a different perspective. So I think the best thing that we can do to enhance our entrepreneurial, we'll call it acumen, is to surround ourselves with other entrepreneurs, no matter what level they're at, no matter what level they're at, and to fully listen to them, but to be in close proximity to them, right? So that could be, once again, Jean right there. Oh well, she's old as gold. Well, maybe that's another comment, but Jean right here, Jean, she must be an entrepreneur, right? She has wins and losses, right? To be able to just talk to her, which why I say it goes back to having a peer group, you know, people who are in actual proximity to you, because the context is oftentimes more important or shapes the content. You know what I mean? And so that's why I've become, I've become such a skeptic of these stories. So I always say, be in close proximity. I like to, I'll actually end it on this is I wrote an article about, it was the most viral article I've ever written called 20 Things I Learned Working for 2 Billionaires, where I did a journal of everything I learned working for Enver Ugel, everything I learned working for Oprah Winfrey, and I looked at the similarities and I said, wow, these are fascinating. One of the things that they both did is they would both have dinners, and in their dinners, so they would try to have dinners almost every night. And in these dinners, they would invite people from different industries. And it would be 20 of us sitting around a table, 12 of us sitting around a table. And I would see they would sit and they would just listen to people interact. They would listen to the ideas. And what I realized is, now keep in mind, they're high level, they're billionaires. So they're inviting mayors and professional athletes and that kind of thing. But as we look at the newspaper or we watch CNN or whatever it may be, we're actually watching the news. We're watching the stories that happened that happened maybe earlier this morning or happened yesterday. We're watching old news. But what Oprah and Enver were doing is they were sitting down with the news makers and they were getting the news of tomorrow. And that's how they were
Mhm.
staying ahead of the curve. So I've actually taken that and I host my own dinners, breakfasts, etc. I try to meet as many entrepreneurs as possible, sit down because I want to get the news of tomorrow. So these are the small things I think we can do that stretches, over and beyond just reading these, reading what I think are inflated biographies of entrepreneurs about how.
That's a good twist.
Yeah,
So speaking of learning from people, we touched on the importance of peer mentorship in some cases with those scenarios. So in terms of the traditional form of mentorship, a lot of entrepreneurs or young professionals are constantly wondering, like, how do I find a mentor?
yeah,
How do you, how and it's important to find a mentor, but it's also important to have the soft skills to maintain the relationship because it's another relationship that you are entering into. What Tell us a bit about your experience with, or what you've learned from working with your mentors, and how people should look at ways that they can be better at, what's the best word to use, nurture and maintain relationships with mentors.
yeah. Good. That's a good follow up because I think most people engage, but then the relationship fizzles, over time. So, to your point, I've had a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of mentors who are all been, mostly entrepreneurs, but not all of them. Um, the two most pivotal mentors of my life. One is alive. One passed away. So one, Enver Yücel, I've been talking about him quite a bit. He's still a mentor of mine. And then another, Peggy Cooper Kafritz. And I don't know if anybody knows Peggy Cooper Kafritz here, but she was phenomenal. Like she, just Google her. She was, she had the largest Black art collection in the world. She founded the Duke Ellington School of Performing Arts in DC that Dave Chappelle went to, which, I know not everybody likes Dave, but, but she was just phenomenal. One story that I like to say, oh yeah, I was telling you this, Carly Ann, is that when Spike Lee was trying to make Malcolm X, Spike Lee went to two people, Michael Jackson and Peggy, and they were the initial funders. They put up, I think, 14 million between the two of them to fund Malcolm X, the movie, with Denzel. So she's just been like this incredible person behind the scenes. And she was the first Black person that I'd ever met in my life that had a staff in her home. It was something. Like my wife and I would go to her home for dinner and a butler would answer the door. We would go upstairs. She would ask us what we want for dinner and she would call it down to her chef. Her chef would make it. And even if we said we wanted something simple, like we wanted watermelon, like real simple, the watermelon would come up chopped in these perfect cubes and doing backflips on our plate. She was just special, man. She introduced me to art, Michaeline Thomas, she changed my life. But to your point is how I was able to establish the relationship with her, how I was able to establish the mentorship with Enver Yücel was something that Sheryl Sandberg wrote in her book, Lean In. And that was, if you have to ask someone to be your mentor, they're not your mentor. They're not going to be
Mm.
your mentor. And that's something that I think we all have to really take note on. I never asked Peggy to be my mentor. I never asked Enver to be my mentor. What ends up happening is the mentor-mentee relationship builds over time. It builds up right over time. And it's really a relationship. It's a two-way. It's about, I think, from the mentee standpoint, it's about saying, how can I support you endlessly? If Peggy called me at 2 a.m. and asked me to do the most obscure thing, I would do it, because that's what she meant to me. If Enver Yücel called me at 2 a.m., which he has before, it's like, hey, get your butt to Istanbul. I always get my butt to Istanbul. I think it's about figuring out, is there someone that you would do that for? Which there's probably a very small number of people you would do that for on this planet, right? But then I think it's about the mentor seeing something in you that they want to nurture, that they believe is going to be beneficial. Now, I'll be very transparent and say that, do I think that Peggy and Enver looked at me and said that there's a way that my brand can, or in investing in me could then end up helping them at a certain point? Absolutely, right? It's not about using, right? It's about leveraging. There's a difference between using and leveraging, because they're also investing in me. But so I think that the mentor needs to see immense promise, and it's up to the mentee to be able to show that through your willingness to do things. Also, I say this is, from a strategic standpoint, this is probably the best advice I can give to a mentee, is put money in your mentor's pocket. It seems like, what? But no, put money in your mentor's pocket. Show them that you could broker deals. I'll be very transparent. I'll tell you how I cemented my relationship with Peggy and Enver. My relationship with Enver came first. He was coming to the U.S. and I was trying to build my relationship with him. And he mentioned in one of our meetings that he was trying to get a meeting with Hillary Clinton. At that time, it was Senator Hillary Clinton. I had zero connections, but I took my butt to the Capitol and you could walk right into I didn't even realize this. You could walk right into the office. I walked right into the office and I tried to get a meeting. Long story short, I couldn't get the meeting with her, but I was able to get a meeting with one of her deputies, right? So I was able to broker a meeting between one of her deputies and him. I could see he lit up. He was like, wow, this guy he's about his business, That was the beginning. And then other things spiraled. I then built my relationship with Enver, started working with Enver, started building my relationship with Peggy. The biggest win that I ever had with Peggy was when I was able to broker a deal for Peggy to travel to Istanbul to talk about, she hosted there was a conference on art and all this stuff. And I was able to get her locked in as a speaker. So airfare, tour, whole nine. And Peggy, her son, me, and Jill all went together. Come on, we spent 2 weeks traveling around Turkey. Of course, we're going to be besties after that. You know what I mean? And so that wasn't necessarily putting money per se, but that was the experience. That was a big trip for her. These are some of the things that I was doing behind the scenes, not saying I'm doing this so I could become their mentee, but I'm doing this because this is someone that I hold with such high regard. I want to endlessly add value and try to support them. So I know those are long stories, but that's like the behind the scenes of how I personally was able to really start to lock in relationships with my mentors.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to give the audience time to ask their own questions, but final question.
Okay.
What is your ultimate vision for yourself as an entrepreneur? Or what legacy do you want to create as an entrepreneur?
Kasim Dean, Swiss Beats. I want to make history. I want to make history in the teaching of relationship science, but in full transparency, I don't know how yet. I love TV. I love, production, but something tells me it may not even be through TV and production. I think this is not my end. This is just my means to my end. I'm trying to figure it out, and I think that's also important for me to underscore is I don't feel like I've made it. I feel like I'm making it. Like I'm on the journey, I'm on the grind, and I'm grinding harder now than I was, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Like I'm really grinding hard. And so I don't know, but I'm trying to build the systems, the psychological space, the support networks, continuing developing my skills, putting myself in these uncomfortable scenarios so that I can grow, right? Making sure I keep my relationships with my mentors, I'm doing all of these things so that and I'm giving myself like, I feel like 10, 12 years is when I will have begun to reach my time, So I'm on the journey, I'm on the journey.
All right, and we will be watching and following the journey. Thank you again for joining us, and I learned a lot, and I know everyone's learned some new things because you dropped a lot of firsts today, which
Yeah.
is amazing. So everyone, please put your questions in the chat for Paul, and also we we're fortunate to have the opportunity to partner with Paul on a thought leadership course. And it's tied to personal branding. So for those of you who tuned in today, we've actually extended our VIP pass exclusively for those of you who tuned in today. So click on the link that's in the chat if you're interested in finding out more. It expires tomorrow at midnight. All right.
Carlin, I have to say this.
Yeah.
I have to say this. I just see my man, right? You see Herb right there, Herb Mott. He says, it's Herb back in your Unisys days. This is incredible. I have not talked to her in, could be 15 years. I was an intern. I worked in the mailroom so when I was in college, I worked in the mailroom at Unisys. Herb was what he was a professional. Like he didn't work he was actually a professional. And it's incredible. It's incredible. Like, oh my God.
Wow.
I'm not like,
and he's here.
Yeah. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Herb, good to see you. Or, good to see the note, Great. It's great.
What would you say is the best way to network, meet up with other entrepreneurs safely?
The chat room of live streams. Seriously, like I'm gonna say this, and the folks that kind of know me in here will know this is the best place to network are chat rooms. This chat room right here, and let me and I know I've said it, but I just want to underscore it. Think about this. Whoever is here right now, you've stuck around for an hour and a half. So I'm saying something that resonates with you. So the person that's also in the chat means that you're resonating on the same thing. Chances are you share the same values. Chances are you're on the same career path. Chances are you're probably at the same level. You're probably, working somewhere, disgruntled, want to move, whatever it may be. There will be a myriad of similarities between you, more than a dating app could connect you on. And I'm not saying that this is about dating, right? But I'm just saying that this is the best place for you to your peers are right now here. So right now is where, and this is what I would suggest you do. You should be dropping, hey, here's my LinkedIn, here's my Instagram, follow me here, connect with me here. Or if you're in the, in the class, of course we'll be doing the sprints and the accountability groups there. But this is the best place to network and to do it safely, right? This is a safe space.
How would you describe your relationship with your matchmaking mentor? Was the dynamic different because you paid her? Question from Aline.
Brilliant question. It was, it was. Now, over time, what I did is I made sure to put money in her pocket by referring clients to her. But absolutely, no question about it. My relationship was different with her early on. It was more transactional. But strategically, I'll tell you, and I mentioned earlier why I did it, but just to reinforce it is, I was also, so I wanted a couple things. I wanted to learn more about matchmaking. I wanted to have a mentor, but I also wanted to have brand credibility, which is incredibly important. I know in the course, our course is about thought leadership. And one of the things that, that we're going to talk about is how quickly you can establish brand credibility through the brand of others. My entire career, I've strategically aligned myself with certain brands. Oprah, is another point and example. It's important to align yourself with, and we'll go through how do you identify it, but it's important to align yourself with specific brands. So yes, this is a great question. Was the relationship different? Yes. Would I change it? No, because her stamp of approval helped usher me into the industry. Think about this. This is actually the first time I'm making the connection, but think about this. The person who referred me to Oprah was the writer at O Magazine. The writer allowed me to become her first matchmaker. She came on as a pro bono client off of my endorsements. The matchmaker, Harvard Business Matchmaker, was one of my endorsements. That's really all I had. So you see that, the return on investment was there. You know what I mean? So, so brilliant question that actually allowed me to think through this a little bit differently. Brilliant question.
Do you have a matchmaking platform like eHarmony to be a matchmaker?
No.
Or do you have to have, no, they said, do you have to have a matchmaking platform like eHarmony to be a matchmaker?
Do you have to have a platform? I'm sorry. I'm picking up this dog. He's like, you need to play
The nap
with
is
me right
over.
now. Yeah. The nap is over. So do you have to have? Oh no. A matter of fact, the fastest growth right now are offline matchmakers, and that's globally. And not to go on a crazy tangent, but one of the areas I'm really looking at, because I like the science of this, but one of the areas that I'm really looking at is how governments are investing more in marriage. And you're seeing governments now actually paying matchmakers, Singapore in particular, paying a lot of money. So yeah, you don't have to have your own platform. And I think now is probably the best time ever in the history of matchmaking to become a matchmaker.
Who are your top 3 role models? What do you believe the future sunglass of the future future sunglass of the future in regards to entrepreneurship? I guess we can tackle the first part of that question first.
Okay, gotcha. You know, my father, my mother, my wife, those are my, I mean, really, like, I'm not even being facetious. I think it's important to know the reason why I say I've become disenchanted on stories of entrepreneurs is because, we don't know how they're living. Let me give you two quick examples. Jeffrey Bezos. Jeffrey Bezos, I used to ride for Jeffrey Bezos, right? You know, I loved everything he was doing from the business side. And then, I hear stories of him being unfaithful to his wife. And then, and I begin to think, does that, does my opinion of him as just a human being, does that shape my opinion of him as an entrepreneur? Absolutely. So I have to then now, devalue him as, as one of my role models. But let me give you an even bigger one is if you were to go, in our home in DC, we have a library, right? The first room we built was a library. We were super proud, right? So we've got a library. Do you know who has the most books of any entrepreneur that I bought and read was Donald Trump? Now, some of you may be saying, Paul, what are you doing? Well, a lot of people don't realize that, in particular, even in the black community in particular, coming out of New York, Donald Trump was the role model. You listen to rap songs in the late 80s, early 90s, it was all about Donald Trump. I've read like 6 5 books, The Art of the Deal, the blah, 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 blah. That was it, right? He was my role model then. Is he my role model now? Hell to the no, right? What changed? I got a chance to get a glimpse into how he lives his life. So that's the reason why I can't sign up to any role models I don't know. I have to know you in order to first, put you into that category.
That is a good point.
Yeah. What do you think, Peter Gabriel? You agree with that? He agrees.
How do you get a deal off the ground without the right connections and know-how? In other words, trying to get it started from point A to B, even with research, you want the proper contacts.
Okay. All right, Carlene, you have to break that one down for me.
Okay. So how do you get a deal off the ground without knowing the right people? So we could tackle that part first.
Okay.
And they also said know-how. So I guess maybe they're not they've never built a business. Let's assume that they mean they're a first-time entrepreneur too.
Okay. All right. So I wish Seymour, I wish I knew, more specifics. I don't know if we can ask Seymour for more specifics, because it depends. The answer could be you need to make the connections, right? The answer may be there's a way to get around it. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business? And then I think I can give more specifics instead of giving you a generic. But let me give you a generic, right? One generic is whatever industry you are in, and this actually touches on our course that we're doing with Parsons here, is whatever industry you're in, if you want to sell product and service in that industry, it's important for you to show up as an expert or a thought leader, right? And that requires you to make connections, but strategically you want to make the right connections. And what we'll talk about, oh my God, what we'll talk about in the course is we'll talk about how you want to make connections with what we call the influencers. Now, influencers aren't just people on Instagram, who have a couple 100,000 people. Influencers are your media outlets. Influencers are, morning shows, producers at morning shows who are working on the topic of your industry, right? It's important for you to make those key connections, because I will promise you this: you could be exceptional at creating products and services, right? You could be the best at whatever you create, but if you don't have the relationships, if you don't have some type of buy-in from the industry, you just can't operate in it. You can't do it. Just as, and I don't want to push you this way, but you all will agree with me on this. Just as you could have terrible skills, you could create crap products, but if you have the right connections, you could become phenomenally successful in your industry. You know what I mean? So the connections are key, but you want to have the right connections. And that's what we'll talk about, how you want to drill down to the influencers in the industry.
Yep. Who you know is important.
Yes.
All right. Knowing the value of your work, at what point did you realize it was time to shift from pro bono to paying clients? Question from Lucia.
That's a great question. When I thought our house was going to get foreclosed on, I mean, to keep it all the way real, it was one of that. It was the money had run out, and it was time to, it was time for us to make it happen. I think that there is a science to when, and that is when you feel as if your runway, the runway is the amount of money that you have to start a business. When you feel that the runway is coming down, also part of the science is when you feel like you've learned enough pro bono. Maybe in 3 months you could have learned what took me 2 years to learn. But you're asking me now, like, how I did it is we had no money. Like I always tell the story, like, if you Google Paul Brunson 2010, you're always going to see me show up in the same suit. It's a black suit, black tie, white shirt, right? And people will say, all right, Paul, you got your Cornell West on, you had your uniform, that was cool. No, I didn't have any money to buy another suit. I couldn't buy another tie. I couldn't buy another collared shirt. We had no money. Like we were 3-4 months behind in our mortgage. So it was it's one of these where there's no exact science time, but you want to do it when you have proven that there's a need for the product, and when you've proven to yourself that you believe you could deliver on that need.
All right, this is from Victoria. My husband and I want to start a matchmaking company. We literally thought of it a few weeks ago. How do we start?
Okay. So, uh, I'll give you two things. One thing is I would go to what's called the Global Institute of Love. They used to be called the Matchmaker Institute, but they're the biggest professional network of matchmakers in the world out of New York. A friend of mine named Lisa Clampett runs it. You want to connect with them. They have training, and that's the right way to enter the industry. So you want to do that. And then second is I'll tell you, Victor, I'll give you something special. Is if you and your husband actually decide to start it, then just reach out to my assistant, and I'll do a free, and I don't charge for this stuff, like 15-minute call just to help you guys. And I tell you, the reason why I do this is anyone who's entering the matchmaking space or date coaching space or therapy space, I always do a support call too. And it's because when I entered the matchmaking space, there was a date coach that I loved, or I thought I loved. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, I'm trying to get into the industry. I'd love just to have 15 minutes of your time. And he was like, cool, no worries. Book it here on my calendar. I booked it, got on the call. I was super excited. I had my 10 questions. And he said, so is that going to be check or PayPal? I said, what? He said, are you sending me a check or PayPal? He said, my time for 15 minutes is $350. And I was like, bro, I'm just trying to get 10 questions asked, like just support, just support me on the strength of me being. And he said, nah, right? And I committed that once I obtained some knowledge, no matter what, I'll get that time. So just reach out to my assistant. It's Tiana@paulcbrunson.com. Tiana@paulcbrunson.com. Just let her know you guys are starting a matchmaking space. She'll book you, and don't worry, like I'm not trying to sell you anything. It's just come with your questions. We'll go hard for 15 minutes, and and then hopefully I'll see you guys at a conference.
So Kelly asks, Paul, is there a book you can recommend about tips for building business communication skills and how best to approach people in industries that you have no connections in?
Is there a book for building business communication skills? That's a great question. Yes.
Well, Influence is a good one, right?
Yeah. Influence and Persuasion by Robert Cialdini are phenomenal books, must read on business communication. I will say my favorite is going to sound like a soft book, but How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And the reason why is because it's such a basic book about how to just build a rapport with someone and do it in a non-usy, salesy, slimy way. So those three would be, I think, those are exceptional books on communication skills. And then one thing I'll say in terms of a platform is LinkedIn is a phenomenal platform. And I want to underscore that. On one of my interviews, I interviewed a woman who at 17, she had just graduated from school, but she basically did over $10 million in sales for her business, no connections, all through LinkedIn, all through just direct messaging people on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a great platform. And then lastly, too, when you talk about industry, you want to be strategic. Also know that people move off of, influence. or brand. So if you're approaching someone, they should be able to see in your bio, in your photos, something that will compel them, you know what I mean, to want to even respond to you, to want to do business, with you. Uh, that's a whole longer discussion, but you want to know that when you're reaching out on a platform like LinkedIn, it's not just about the message, it's about your profile. It's about what articles have you written. It's about it. Unfortunately, it is about how many people are following you, how many connections you have. So all of those speak to your credibility. So yeah, I hope that helps. Those 3 books, and that would be my suggestion.
All right. Well, last call for questions.
Yeah.
Before we go.
Any questions for Peter Gabriel? Peter Gabriel is taking. Are you taking? He's taking questions. He's taking questions. This is it. This is his first Q&A. Get in there. First Q&A. What do you got?
That's so cute.
No. No questions. No questions.
All right. Well, Paul, thank you so much again. This was great. This was fun.
Carlin, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What is the number one lesson that you are taking from today's conversation? I'm genuinely curious about. And also, can I ask everybody too? What's the number one new lesson that you're taking from today's conversation?
So I loved your advice on nurturing mentor relationships, because that's something that I'm always looking to learn how to be better at. And because relationships are everything. It's what makes everything happen. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but if you know what you're doing and you know the right people, things happen. So you talking about how you nurtured your relationships with Peggy and Eugene, that's my number one lesson that I took out of this, and we'll be watching the replay to go back into the details.
All right. I love it. Yeah, I see it. Teach your story. Yeah. I love it. I love this is the reward, of a session like this, is seeing how, seeing lessons, that people take away, implement in their life. It's great. Yeah. I love that.
Tina talked about the psychological safety.
Yes. Peace out to toxic
Peace
people.
out to toxic people. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Teaching through stories. I like that. Yeah.
Judah is mentioning the Oprah quote. I'm going back to frame that because that was a really powerful quote. And that quote has a lot of meaning. She was talking about it in the literal sense while you were physically there on stage, but it touches on so many things in life, including it reminded me of what you were talking about with your superpower, right?
Yeah. It was one of those moments where yeah. Yeah, I love it. Tiffany, this was confirmation. I should keep pushing to return to London. I felt myself leveling up there. Yeah.
Yes, Tiffany. London is my favorite city too.
There you go. Yeah, getting tomorrow's news and hosting dinners. Yeah, that's a good one. Strategizing, being the exception. Good stuff. That influencers might be worth connecting and are not just persons on social media with hundreds of followers. Good stuff. These are great lessons. Great lessons. It looks like the walk until you feel the light is the top one. That's the top one. Good stuff.
All right. This was great. I love listening to your talks and interviews because there's always something or a lot of new things to learn. And thank you again for joining us today on a Saturday. And thank you for partnering with us as well on the personal branding course. This is a course that talks about personal branding, but specifically tied to thought leadership. Again, we have a special VIP link that we dropped in the chat. We'll drop it in again. So if you want to check that out and take the course, you have until tomorrow at midnight to get that special price. connect with everyone in the chat. I see that there was a spreadsheet started. We also have the Parsons Entrepreneur Academy network that you can join, over 2,000 and something other creative entrepreneurs in connecting globally. And thank you all for joining us today and giving us your time on Saturday. Hope to see you all again at future Parsons Entrepreneur Academy events. All right. Thank you, Paul. And Peter Gabriel.
Yeah, he's asleep again.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.